So we have enough to proceed?
You do. You can
Okay.
call the order and we can do virtual meeting protocols.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your afternoon schedule to be a part of the executive committee meeting. Want to recognize some of our protocols. You're going to place them up. Can you place them for me, Amy?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep.
Just to make sure that the council meeting shall be accessible via Zoom. All council members participate Zoom. Let me see. I'm just going to sum it up. Make sure that, etiquette protocols, make sure that you keep your camera on. Make sure that you raise your hand to request a comment. Upon being recognized to speak by the chair, the microphone should be turned on. After speaking to the microphone shall be returned to mute. Post all comments relevant to the conversation in the chat box. Make sure that you are aware that this video is being live streamed via YouTube. And please be recognized by the chair before any comments. Let's be respectful of each other. Now at this time, we'll go ahead and have a roll call vote. Roll call. I apologize. You have your hand up.
Okay. Rashad Bristow.
Here.
Nicole Banks.
Here.
Dr. Hyacinth McKee.
Present.
Kim Bazile.
Present.
Jill Hano.
Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum at this point. We'll have our mission statement. Amy, if you will you read the mission statement on the ground rules, please?
Sure. Sorry, I forgot to pull it up.
No problem.
The council's mission is to increase independence, self-determination, productivity, integration, and inclusion for Louisianians with developmental disabilities by engaging in advocacy, capacity building, and systems change.
All right, thank you, Amy. Next item up for business is the approval of the minutes from July 21st. The executive committee meeting, which was distributed. Meeting summary will not be read unless requested by a member. Are there any corrections to the July 21st meeting minutes?
I move to accept the minutes.
All right, thank you. It's been moved by Dr. McKee.
I second.
All right, it's been moved by Dr. McKee and second by Vice Chair Nicole Banks. Thank you so much. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Minutes have been accepted. Now, on our agenda, we're looking at the proposed legislative agenda. That's the next item up for business. You should be able to access the document through the link on the posted agenda, just like what we have on our screen. There were two documents, the LeCan 2022. There we go.
Yes, so the first document is the 2022 legislative kickoff recommendations. This document shows, and in case anybody doesn't recall, our legislative agenda is compiled by our LeCan leaders who do public meetings and get ideas from the public about what we should be advocating on. They compile a very large list. We had about, I believe it was 93 possible agenda items that were compiled. And then they rank the items on the list to try to make sure that it seems like it's a legislative, that it's appropriate for legislative advocacy, and that it coincides with our mission and what we're currently working on as council. And after discussing and ranking, they came up with 2 items that they recommend for legislative advocacy this year for our agenda. I would like to just point out that the LACAN leaders and the FHF directors all agreed that the council should consider including no more than 2 to 3 items on the legislative advocacy agenda. The reason being that anything more than that becomes really difficult for them to basically be attentive to all of the items, and really represent how they would like to. So the 2 items that were ranked the highest and that are recommended to be on the agenda is the funding for implementation of cameras in special education classrooms. If you'll recall, in last year's legislative advocacy agenda, we had a cameras in classrooms bill. The bill passed, but the funding was taken, the fiscal note was taken out of that bill. So the bill passed without any funding. So the recommendation is that we go back and try to ask for funding for this this cameras in classroom bill. I have spoken to Senator Foyle, who sponsored the bill last year. He does intend to go back to the legislators this year and work on clarifying language with the bill. When it came to funding, he was a little less certain, but did say that it was possible that we could get a one-time appropriation for funding, which would probably allow school districts to at least purchase equipment. The second bill that was recommended, or the second item that was recommended, was continuation of Appendix K exceptions. Specifically, a parent or relative is paid caregiver. This was the second bill that was recommended. There does seem to be some work on this issue within OCDD. And they do seem to be working on making changes to their waivers to have in place prior to the end of the public health emergency, which is when these Appendix K exceptions are currently in place, and they would end 6 months after the end of the public health emergency. So OCDD does seem to be trying to make some changes in their waivers that they hope to have in place prior to that. The other linked item that was in the agenda is the list of 93 items that was generated by the public. So if you are interested, you can take a look at that.
Does anybody have anything they want to discuss about this? Jill, recognized.
Yeah, well, I'm assuming the 93 items from the LACAN members were generated before kickoff, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Bambi Polozola, you recognized.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I have some concerns about the parents or the I guess the legally responsible representative as a direct support worker, and for several reasons. But a few of those reasons are just historically have been around for a while. I know that the political pendulum swings, and I'm concerned about political pushback and some of the things that could happen if legislators or the message gets out that, you know, moms are getting paid $30,000 to stay home with their children. And how does that play out politically? Also, you know, I feel like if we're abandoning the idea that our waivers are working to support our person as the way that they should, then maybe what we should be asking is for a family financial stipend or some type of supplemental income, because basically that's what it is. We're saying that our provider system is not working for us, and that families have to depend on themselves, and we're asking for financial assistance because that's essentially what's going to be happening. So I think we got to think about it in that way. And also I think it kind of goes against the you know, abandoning our capacity building, because our system should work. Families should be able to find qualified workers, because our children are going to become adults and will no longer be here, and we need a system that will continue to be able to support our people with developmental disabilities once their family or their parents age or are no longer with us. And the other thing is that we need to look at ways in which we are promoting independence. Is that really, I think we just need to be critically think about how are we promoting independence. And lastly, I think that while I don't know of any family that would intentionally make a decision against their person's best interest, their child or their whoever they're legally responsible for. Once a family begins to have this income of potentially $1,000, $2,000 a month, sometimes that line of what's best for that person in the family's financial situation, that line will get blurry. And so I just want to throw that out there. I know that's probably not popular, and I know that we have some real issues. I faced them myself in regards to having caregivers and support staff for my son. And so some of the issues are real, and I'm open to hearing those things, but I just want to throw those issues out there because I want us to really make recommendations that stick to our values and support our people with developmental disabilities to be able to be more independent and long-term solutions. And that's it. Thank you guys for your time.
Okay, thank you, Bambi. Do we have anyone else that has anything they'd like to say or concerns?
Mr. Chair, 4 attendees have their hand raised. Kathy Dwyer.
Ms. Kathy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Executive Committee. I was going to ask a question initially about the comprehensive dental for adults in terms of needing to be a priority, but I don't want to take the Executive Committee off topic after Bambi's discussion. And I would just like to add some information. Bambi and I kind of had a discussion about this yesterday, and I certainly understand Bambi's concerns, but I'm trying to rack my memory now. When my daughter was one of the first 100 on the waiver system, and if I'm not mistaken, part of the reason the waiver or families started requesting the need for the waiver is because it was difficult to find the appropriate care and support for our loved ones. And yes, it did include making sure that the individuals get the services that they need to support them to become as independent and productive as possible. That's certainly an important priority. But I don't think we should abandon the LaCan item altogether. Being chair of the State Advisory Committee for OCDD, and having participated on some of the stakeholder meetings and so forth, it's my understanding that there are quite a few, or will be quite a few, restrictions in place, be it from CMS at the federal level down to the state. I think, and OCD is, as everybody probably knows, or most everyone is getting ready to conduct some focus groups to get a little more information about how this should work and so on and so forth. So I think it's too early to abandon something like that until we see what it's really going to play out to be. And I think this would be the perfect opportunity to address Bambi's concerns in that program as they develop it. I myself have had problems since the inception of getting good qualified workers. The waiver was extremely important. It was a lifesaver because I had reached a point where my daughter was too old for typical childcare and so forth. And I was facing a choice of having to quit work unless I could figure something else out. And thank the Lord, the waiver passed and we were able to be selected as one of the first 100. Now that she's an adult, and especially through COVID, I've had the opportunity to kind of reflect back on the services. There were a lot of challenges prior to COVID with maintaining staff, and even some behavioral challenges with my daughter that flared up as a result, possibly as a result of so many different staffs coming on board. Since COVID, while I'll be the first to admit, I do not need, there's no way I could physically take care of my daughter 24/7 for the rest of my life. I'm aging, and that's, there's going to be a limit to that. And even now during COVID, since I have her the majority of the time, with the exception of when she visits her father every other weekend, I have seen my daughter blossom being with me. Because I'm able to give her more of the one-on-one attention she needs. And if it wasn't for COVID, I would be taking her out a little bit more in terms of working on her community skills, but she's in the high risk category, so I can't take her out as much solely because of that. So I would just ask the council to please consider supporting this, at least the development of it, and let's see where it's going to go. Let's make sure we have the appropriate guidelines and so forth in place to make sure we address everyone's needs. And that's the individuals first, so that they reach their maximum potential, but the families as well. Because the families do need support sometimes more than they're getting. Granted, we're working on trying to improve the quality of direct support workers, noted particularly recently with some of the pay increase, and we need to continue working on that because it's still not a competitive wage. And we definitely need to work on competency-based training for direct support workers, because that's one thing I found, a lot of them lack the appropriate training, even in typical parenting skills. Which would apply to some of the caregiver roles that they take. But I would support to keep moving forward with continuing the exception, the Appendix K exceptions at this point until we see further how that's going to look like, whether or not it'll be for the next session or not. And when everybody's finished discussing this part, then I'd like to raise my hand again and discuss the dental legislation. I just don't want to take people off track of the discussion. Thank you.
Dr. McKee, you have your hand raised.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Ms. Dart. Dr. McKee, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for being recognized. This is almost like 6 in one hand and a dozen in the other. From what I remember, not just so long ago, the DD Council strongly advocated for a rate increase and for all of the dollars to go to our direct service professional. We were greeted with so much political pushback just to get those dollars to go directly to our direct support professionals to ensure that they're being paid adequately to service our families. Now, the DD Council is being asked to stand strongly to advocate for this measure by LaCan. I support what Ms. Kathy Dwyer is saying. We are in a time right now where our families just really do not have the people. They cannot find the people, let alone the amount of money to pay the people to provide this service. And this idea that mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers are getting rich or potentially get rich off of providing direct service to their family members, I don't want that message to be sent. That's not what the intent is. So I fully support us moving ahead as a council to support this, especially in light of COVID-19. People just cannot find consistent workers to go into these homes and to support these families. So I pray that our executive council as well moves forward with the full council to support the CAN's initiatives.
Thank you, Dr. McKee, for your comments. Who do we have next? Amy with public comment. I see Ms. Jill Hayno.
Jill Hayno has her hand raised.
Jill, you're recognized by the chair.
I don't know.
You're muted. Jill.
Yeah.
Sorry. Dr. McKee, that was amazing. And but y'all both had such good points. And I was, as Bambi was talking, and maybe I need to go to Julie with this, but I was curious to know, are the Appendix K of exceptions an all or nothing type thing? Like if we did more research and had more feedback, and it turned out that the legislation was against parents as caregiver, could they take that out and still advocate for what is in the 16-hour work rate, the 16-hour rule, and the other one, or is it an all or nothing thing?
I don't believe that it's all or nothing, because there seem to be those separate parts to the Appendix K exceptions. So I don't think it's necessarily all or nothing. I believe that LaCan's focus was the parents or the legal guardians as paid caregivers, but there are other parts of Appendix K, like you mentioned, the 16-hour rule and the virtual services that are a part of it too.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those comments, Jill, and they're noted. Do we have any other comments? Amy?
We do. Charles Michel has his hand raised.
I'm sorry, I missed the name.
Charles Michel.
Okay, Mr. Michel, you're recognized by the chair.
Thank you. Two comments real brief. One of them is, I agree with what Hyacinth was saying about the providers and not.
We can't hear. I can't hear what Dr. Michelle is saying. I'm sorry. Is it my audio perhaps?
No,
I can't hear you.
I can't hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
That's better. Yes.
What I was saying is, I agree with what Hyacinth was saying about the DD Council's stand on the care attendants and the parents and all that. But one thing I just realized a couple of weeks ago is that the agency that my son uses, they got to keep all the money because nobody got raises because they were making $9 an hour. I didn't realize that was the wording of the law. But so what that does is it keeps it more difficult to get workers because the problem has not been addressed at all. So I wanted to say that because that was new information to me. Maybe I wasn't paying attention enough, but that was new information for me. That's the first thing. The second thing is I would like for y'all to consider recommending to the full council adding one more thing to the legislative list, and that would be a continuation of the funding that the Families Helping Family Centers got. We purposely did not discuss that during LACAN because we honored the concerns that the council shared with us last year, that it wasn't coming from the families, and I get that. So I know in Bioland, and I think many other centers did the same thing, we did not include that as a discussion item on our roundtable or with our parents or the people that were doing the testimonies. The reason we did was because this is a sort of behind the scenes thing, and the parents don't really know what it costs to provide these services. As you all know, the costs have gone up significantly over the past years since the original allocation was made, but the allocation remained constant until last year. Those costs are not going to go down if we don't get those funds. What I would ask that you do is look at the satisfaction surveys and see. The parents don't know what it costs or how the funding is done, but they do know if they're getting what they need from the Families Helping Family Centers. So I'm going to ask that I know this is off the beaten path, but I'm going to ask that you please consider adding that as the third item and doing like the DD Council did so many years ago and actually trying to get it to be a permanent funding increase, the very least for this next year, but permanent if possible. And that's all I've got to say. I appreciate any consideration y'all can give us.
Chair, if I could just address that really quickly.
Yes, please.
Charles, just so you know, I'm trying to get that funding continued through our budgetary process right now. So just so you know, I'm working on it internally in our budgetary process to try to get those funds continued. Liz Gary has her hand raised.
Well,
Liz, you're recognized by the chair. Thank you, Scott. Liz, you're recognized by the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. I appreciate Bambi's concerns, but I do want to address the issue back with the Appendix K issues and legal representatives. I think it's important to realize that Louisiana is only one of 2 states that did not allow this up until the Appendix K issue was addressed. This has been an issue that's been ongoing for many, many years that other states allow it, and we've been lagging behind in it. So I would hate to see that it would not be continued to be considered. As far back as when my son was first born 19 years ago, I can remember a mother who had an adult daughter with Down syndrome was telling me, be sure you get on that waiver, but also you need to be pushing legislatively wise, because in other states, they actually pay parents to take care of their kids because it's so hard to find good provider agencies. And it's also, sometimes it's so hard for the parents to even work. So by getting them paid, then they don't have to worry about trying to find somebody and they're getting income. But I just wanted to share that because I do think for 19 years, I've been hearing this as a concern, and it was even confirmed 2 years ago at a conference that the issue is one that Louisiana and only one other state do not allow. So thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it.
Thank you for those comments, Ms. Gary. Do we have any more public comment?
We do. Kelly
Gio
Monroe.
Hano. Okay, I apologize. Ms. Kelly Monroe, you're recognized by the chair.
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry, I had trouble unmuting. So I just had a couple of comments. When before last session, we had surveyed a lot of families, and that was the #1 thing that they wanted, was to be able to serve as the direct support worker. Most of these people were from some of the Families Help and Family Centers. They were self-advocates. I really do think that you should, continue to keep it on there. I hope you guys have better luck than what we did at the ARC. And coming from parents, maybe you will have better luck with that one. The other two, I feel confident that those are going to be taken care of. But I also just wanted to I know Jill had asked a question. I think it was Jill that asked a question, is it all or nothing? No, you can pick and choose. Those were three of the exceptions that families, self-advocates, and providers requested. So, but there were so many other on the Appendix K. So you can treat them each individually if you choose to. So, and I know they're working on the other two, supposedly through rulemaking. So, but I just know how many people requested that and how many families requested it. And I think it would be great if you guys could keep it on. And then also, I just wanted to kind of respond to Charlie's comment. I understand, I understand being upset when you think that, so much money is going to go to the DSPs. And most providers gave the raise. If they don't, they're going to lose employees even more so. And, just like you were saying, you're providing the service at Families Helping Families, you need the increase to cover those costs. That's what they were saying too. So I just think that people really don't realize the amount of work and what type of work the others are doing and how it's important. And maybe at some point, getting together somebody from the council, some family members and some providers and self-advocates in the same room to kind of talk about these things. Because I really don't think that the others really know what the other ones are going through. So, but that's all I got. Thanks.
All right, thank you for those comments, Kelly. Do we have any more comments in the chat box?
You have two more public participants with their hand raised, and I believe Jill Hano has her hand raised as well.
Okay.
Mary Jacob.
Okay. Mary Jacob, you're recognized by the chair for your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to piggyback on what everybody's saying about the situation with the DSPs, and I completely understand what Bambi is saying, but I also completely understand what everybody else is saying. And I kind of feel the same things that Bambi's saying, but I also know that even before COVID, one of the hottest topics we would get on and calls we would always take is parents that were so frustrated because they could not find reliable DSWs to help with their children, whether it was part-time, full-time, whatever they needed. It was just impossible to find people. There was this constant revolving door. And if you lived in an area that was a little bit rural, it was almost nearly impossible. There was nobody, they said, that the time, I'm in the greater New Orleans area and I'm talking to somebody in Lower Plaquemines, and to get somebody to go out there for 4 hours a day wasn't going to happen. So it was a situation where a lot of people weren't even using the hours that they had allocated to them because they couldn't find people to take care of their loved ones. So I think when you add COVID to that, it makes it that much more difficult. But I absolutely agree and understand what Bambi's saying, because it is a fear that, are we going to send the wrong message? But I think that it's risk taking that fear, because at the end of the day, people have to have their loved ones taken care of. They have to know they have quality care coming into their homes. These are the most vulnerable population out there, and we can't risk people not being taken care of the right way. And I think that, the family member is going to be the one that does it more than that we can depend on the most. My original comment was going to be made about, I was kind of sad to see that the dental stuff wasn't on there. And I'll tell you why. I've been the chair of the Jefferson Parish RAC previously, and I'm still an active member on the RAC. And without a doubt, the topic that comes up every single RAC meeting, and it has for probably 5 years now, is the lack of adult dental care. And I've heard horror stories, including people being on their deathbed in the hospital because of illness, disease that they've gotten because of lack of dental care. I mean, we know that oral health is important. We've done so much research on this. We know that it's linked to respiratory disease, cardiovascular disease, other things like that. It's absolutely relevant and prevalent in individuals with disabilities. Medicaid will only cover minimum preventative services, zero care. Once they turn 21, other than a basic cleaning, unless you want your teeth pulled, you're not going to really get much. It's very, very difficult to get more than that. The American Dental Association has been reporting on this for probably now 2 decades. The link between, the overall health of people and bacterial pneumonia and cardiovascular disease that impact people, specifically people with developmental disabilities. This is something that I think that the Dental Task Force last year did an amazing job getting this moved forward, but it's still so far away from getting where it needs to be. And I really believe this really, truly deserves some attention by LACAN. So many people have, when I got into this business, my kids were young and they don't have Medicaid now, thank goodness, but everybody I know that does have Medicaid that has adult children are really screwed, y'all. They have nowhere to go that when it comes to beyond that basic cleaning. In some places in the state, you can't even get the basic cleaning that well. But when it comes to the cost of a lot of these individuals, because they don't like people prodding in their mouth, has to have anesthesia just to have basic cleanings done. It costs the family lots and lots of money. And yes, I know they can go to the individual family support funds and the LGEs, but you know what? They don't have enough money to pay for all that either. So I just would really, really like and hope that y'all would reconsider the whole dental bill also. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Ms. Jacobs. Jill, I know you're recognized by the chair. I see your hand up. Jill, you're recognized by the chair. I see your hand up.
Sorry, it went away. Every time someone said something, I have a new question, but back to Dr. Michelle. Sorry, I pronounced that wrong. But back to families helping families. When I was going through all this and working on all our legislation, like council minutes or council recaps from 20 or the 21 legislative session, I didn't realize, they're only gonna get the $500,000. There's a time limit. No, I can't talk. There's it's only a certain amount of time that you'll get these funds for in a certain amount of time. And then I thought they would last for, I thought that, well, it can't, but how can we get that to where it is a more permanent think, or would that have to be on our planning every year? No, I'm not making sense.
Jill, when an amount of money is put in by the legislators, it goes in only for 1 year. And then for any items like that, if they are to be continued, I met with the Commissioner of Administration. He told me that that for it to be continued, it needed to be approved as a part of the DD Council's budgetary process, because those funds appear in the DD Council's budget.
Well, I definitely think that is something that should be ongoing, because it's not fair to have this money 1 year, then the next year, like, oh, back to our 2020 budget, like, so I definitely wanna make sure and talk to the full council tomorrow and make sure that that's ongoing for 22. And also, can I ask another question?
Go ahead, Jill, you have the floor.
Thank you. This dental also, we've heard already multiple public comments about the dental services, and this is an ongoing issue, and this issue definitely needs to be addressed. Like, I think we need to get our dental services back on our 2022 agenda.
Okay, your comments are noted, Jill, about dental services, reviewing that for the 2022 agenda.
Kathy Dwyer has her hand raised.
Ms. Dry, you're recognized by the chair. Ms. Kathy Dry, you're recognized by the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't receive the message to unmute. That's why it took a little while. I want to thank Mary Jacob for speaking on behalf of the dental bill, and Jill Hanno. Thank you so much. As chair of the Louisiana Dental Task Force, I would greatly appreciate if the DD Council would consider adding the comprehensive dental for adults with IDD as the part of the third item for the LeCan legislative agenda. While we got Act 450 passed, or HB 172 passed last year, which is now Act 450, it's not finished. The first year of that bill was solely for OCDD to do the research of what kind of funding mechanism would be needed in order to provide those services. And they're still working on trying to figure out what mechanism that is. There was no funding attached for services. The fiscal note noted that $5 million would be needed this coming year, July 1st, in order for the services to be implemented. And that's what we need to advocate for. We truly appreciate LeCan jumping on kind of after the fact last year. It wasn't on their agenda, but we truly appreciate that the DD Council and LeCan jumped on and started including some of our action alerts in their action alerts. But I think if we could get a head start, particularly since $5 million is involved, we're going to need that money in order for those services to be implemented. Without it, we won't have services. Just like Mary said, oral health is important for overall health. The American Medical Association and the American Dental Association both agree that the IDD population is the most underserved population, even more so than others that are labeled as underserved. And dental has been a real concern for some time now. We've got all the research. I can send the DD Council and LaCan all the research the Dental Task Force has done. But we need to make sure that our adults with developmental disabilities get the services they need. We have those, particularly those with severe disabilities, including my daughter, who cannot go see a regular dentist. And this is where the costs really are incurred. She requires going under general anesthesia every time she needs a dental checkup. The last bill I received for that was $4,000 just for general cleaning. There's no way any family with a person with a disability in their family can afford that, given all the other expenses they have to deal with. Additionally, there's a lot of individuals or adults with intellectual developmental disabilities, such as autism, that have some behavior challenges. My daughter hasn't been diagnosed with autism, but she has an aversion to any doctor probing in her mouth. That's one reason she requires the anesthesia. Part of what we're working on with that dental bill is to get the dentists trained so that they know how to use behavior modification approaches to better serve those with behavior challenges. And when you consider how large the autism community is, you can imagine how many probably aren't getting the appropriate oral health services that they need, because they can't tolerate going into a dental office and have the probing and so forth done. So I cannot stress enough how important this bill is. We're halfway there, and we just really need the DD Council and LaCan's help to see it through. So we would really appreciate if you would make the comprehensive dental for adults with IDD a third priority, since you have two right now. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Ms. Dwyer. Do we have anyone else with public comment or any committee members with any comments?
Jill Hayno has her hand raised.
Jill, you're recognized by the chair. You're muted, Jill.
Okay, sorry. Miss Kathy, I wrote this down a while ago, but when did y'all form the dental task force? What year?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jill. It was formed, I want to say 2 years ago. It's been about 2 years. I'll have to get the exact date. My years are meshing through, but 2 years ago when we first formed. It's sort of a task force that was is a result of a motion I had made during one of our state advisory committee meetings after years of people, as Mary Jacob said, years of people coming to our local RAC and come to find out a lot of families, even on Facebook, and many people know Karen Scallon, who helps families on Medicaid and waivers, trying to find a dentist to serve their adult with a disability. There's tons of dentists out there to serve children with disabilities, but we were having trouble finding services for adults. So that's when I proposed the task force at the SAC meeting, and we have been working on that ever since. It's a wonderful task force. We have all players involved. We've got the dentists, we've got the Dental Association, we've got representatives from OCDD, from Medicaid, from from the provider aspect, you know, and we represent or we advocate for services for both those in home and community-based services and those in ICFDD facilities. You know, we've got our work cut out. Right now, we have representatives from the dental school, and we're working with the dean of the School of Dentistry on enhancing their curriculum so that dentists are appropriately trained in serving adults with developmental disabilities, and have even identified some online training for existing dentists, current dentists in the community, to participate in some online training so that they can be prepared once the funding is found, identified, and appropriated so that Act 450 can be implemented.
All right, thank you, Ms. Wright. Do we have any more comments or anything in the chat box, Amy?
In the chat box, we have, let's see, one comment. I agree with Ms. Jacob and Ms. Dwyer. I believe that was Christina Martin who wrote that. And then Nicole Flores. I would also like to ask the committee to recommend adding continued additional funding for FHF centers each year, as well as the dental task force / coverage for adults with IDDD to the legislative agenda. In addition to that, Chair, there's no other public comment. However, the Education and Employment Committee this morning had an item that came up and there was a motion. Dr. McKee, if you wanted to discuss this one before we move on.
Yeah, if I was recognized, if I'm recognized by the chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for being recognized. This morning, the Education and Employment Committee met, and we came up with a motion that we would like to propose to the Executive Committee to move on to the full council for review. The motion was to support the Louisiana Alliance of Post-Secondary Inclusive Education, LAPI's legislation aimed at funding post-secondary programs that are starting up, enhancement grants to grow existing programs, scholarship for students that are eligible. And what LAPI is trying to do is gain more funding to support our students in their opportunity and choice to attend universities and gain that post-secondary and college experience. And so this is the motion that was passed without any objections or abstentions. And we're asking that the Executive Committee looks at this motion so that we can move it so we can forward to full council.
Thank you, Dr. McKee. So, does anybody have any questions in regard to what Dr. McKee just presented?
There is one comment in the chat that is not about that, but I can read that. From Karen Artis. I know there are concerns regarding family members as DSWs. I ask that you keep this as an agenda item as families remain in such great need. Many factors make finding support workers and keeping them difficult with the crisis that exists.
Okay, thank you for that. Dr. McKee, just for clarification, they're requesting that also be an agenda item for the legislative agenda?
That is correct. The Education and Employment Committee is wanting that to be part of the legislative agenda. We feel strongly that there is a need to fund opportunities for our students and families to have access to post-secondary education.
Okay, thank you for that. So now
wait, let me add something as well. LAPI is going to, and I want to add that, advocate and do all things they can to approach and work with legislative as well towards that that motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so in regards to the 2022 legislative agenda, we've had something else presented. I'll entertain a motion.
There were a number of items discussed. Do you want for me to kind of just run through them again?
Yes, just for the sake of clarification.
Okay, from the LaCan recommendations, we have funding for cameras in special ed classrooms. We also have continuation of Appendix K exceptions, specifically the legal guardian or family as parent as paid caregivers. We have had a couple of people mention the continuation of funding for FHF centers, the Families Helping Family Centers. And comprehensive dental for adults with IDD was also brought up. And finally, we have supporting LaPi's legislative agenda item, which is funding for post-secondary education programs.
So was that 6 or 7?
2, 3, 4, 5. It was 5.
5, okay. How does that committee like to proceed forward with those? Dr. McKee, I see your hand. You're recognized by the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Keep it in mind the request of our advocates in the community asking us to be mindful and to not send a lot of agenda items up this time for consideration. I believe we're going to have to engage in some dialogue. I believe last year we had, either it was last year or year before last, we had numerous agenda items that we posed. And so I'm wondering if we can work to try our best to, I don't want to eliminate or minimize anybody's voice, please no, but I do also have to take in consideration the request of our advocates to make sure that we are putting forth the ones that we hear ring true often. And for me, the special education cameras, that has been a consistent outcry for our community and families. And so I certainly do not want that one to be eliminated off of the agenda. I don't know what that funding is going to really look like when it gets to that place, but I know the special education cameras has been a really, really, really big one. And I would not want to see that one fall off as well. And then of course, the DSP, that's another one that constantly rings true, that we hear a lot from the community's concern as well. So I just want to say to the executive committee, we have to keep in mind what our advocates are also asking us. I'm wondering if they have the capacity to advocate for all 5.
Thank you, Dr. McKee. Anyone else, any comments or concerns?
There's a comment in the chat by Mary Jacob asking, is there a dollar amount tied to post-secondary expansion? Ms. Jacob, I'm sure that there will be. I don't know what that amount is yet. This morning was the first time that I heard anything about the legislation. So I believe they're still in early stages of developing it, and I don't think that they have attached dollar figures yet. Ms. Karonda Corley also wrote in the chat, Louisiana will be in more than $1 billion surplus. We can advocate for more. Kathy Dwyer says, true, Karonda, but that one, it's time. You have 2 attendees who have their hand raised that are also Mary Jacob and Karonda Corley, so I'm not sure if I just answered their questions or if they still need to speak.
Ms. Corley, you're recognized by the chair.
Great afternoon, Mr. Chair and Executive Committee. I would like to point out that Louisiana will be in a more than $1 billion surplus, where we can use that money one time as stated. And that one-time funding will allow us to be able to fund many things for our individuals with disabilities, including the cameras in the school system. But the cameras in the school system don't necessarily have to be taken from that funding. As you know, the ESSER funding, as well as the CARES Act and American Rescue funding, has been allocated to our state that is more than $1 billion as well, that can actually fund providing cameras in the classroom that actually record audio as well as video. So when we do put forth these agenda items as far as in what we're going to consider for legislation, I do think that we need to consider something that will actually tap into that $1 billion surplus for a one-time funding for something, because for far too many times our people with disabilities are left with scraps. We're left with absolutely nothing. And if we're gonna continue to consider curriculums, I don't think that we should just have curriculums considered for those in dentistry. I think we need to look at every major that a person can in a university, because people with disabilities are everywhere. We have people with disabilities in the business world, people with disabilities in law enforcement, people with disabilities that are LCSWs, etc. So I think that we need to look at having all the universities incorporate some type of education class that educate individuals how to work with individuals with disabilities. So I just hope that our executive committee really and truly consider going after that $1 billion surplus for something and don't just leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ms. Corley. If I remember correctly, Ms. Mary Jacobs, you're recognized by the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a note about the post-secondary. I cannot, that is a huge passion of mine, honestly, and I am so glad to hear that Dr. McKee brought that to the table. And I just want her to know that if it doesn't make it this time, please call me next year, because I will be pleading for it for you like I did for the dental this year, because I just think that is such an important thing that we have got to be able to expand those programs. And if I thought there was a way to expand them and sustain them with the $1 billion surplus that Ms. Corley's talking about, I'd be saying, let's do it right now. I just don't know enough about it. That's why I asked about the money, how much, if anybody had any idea what that's looking like. But I agree, I think it's a huge thing that we definitely, if not this year, next year, should be a priority item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jacob. So what be the pleasure of the executive committee? We have a lot presented. We know, I apologize. I see Ms. Nicole Banks has her hand up. You're recognized by the chair, Ms. Nicole. Ms. Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Bristow. Just like what everybody else was saying about, we have to make these decisions. They only want us to bring 2 to 3 items to them for this legislative agenda, right? So we only can pick 2 or 3. We have 5 up on our hands right now. We can't really make a really concise decision if we don't know, like, okay, well, if we say this, then how much funding is going to go to there. So I'm not saying that we have to know how much, like what the funding is, but in a way we do need to know what funding can be go to what, so we know which one that we can prioritize the most. So just a rule, maybe that's just something that we all can look at as we put in our recommendations for everybody to vote upon, and which ones we're going to bring to the legislation.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Banks. So again, the executive committee, we're at the, what be your pleasure? We have the legislative agenda before us. We've had 2 on the document and we've had others presented. Amy, if you will, can you pull those back up on the agenda? That way they can have a visual.
I can pull up the first 2. The rest I don't have all in one document.
No, it's fine. It's fine. So we know we have these two. We've had several others that have been presented, even when it comes down to dental. The education committee is presented. I'm willing to entertain a motion just to see what be the pleasure of the executive committee, so we know what we'd be presenting to the entire council. Okay, Kim Bazile, you have your hand up. You're recognized by the chair.
Thank you. I would like to make a motion that we accept the top two recommendations from the Legislative Kickoff Committee, along with the recommendation from the Education Committee, and the fourth one being the dental. I don't know how to word it. I'll need help with that, but that's the meat of the motion.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor to accept the top two off the agenda, as well as along with the education recommendation and dental. Do we have a second? Do we have any questions? But without a second, the motion is lost. I'll entertain another motion. I see Dr. McKee has her hand raised. Dr. McKee, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for being recognized. And I believe the comment in the chat box is reading my mind. I don't know who that is, but I see the wording. I believe that individual is reading my mind. The top issue and the third issue, funding for the implementation of cameras in special education classrooms. And then there's the second one, data and accountability of cameras in special education classroom. Is that something that can be combined or put together? Because it seems like it's similar, or maybe I'm missing something. I'm not well versed in all of the acts, y'all. So can that be combined into one issue?
Thank you, Dr. McKee.
I'm only asking that so that it could free up space for, another issue to have the opportunity. That's why I'm asking that. So, Mr. Chair, I'm not know if our executive director can give us some feedback on whether 1 and 3 can be combined.
Amy?
Let me hold up. They likely could be combined. If that's what you would like to do, we can do that. That does not take any of the 5 other recommendations off of the table, though. So it consolidates 2, but the data and accountability of cameras in special education classrooms wasn't initially on the table, if that makes sense.
Dr. McKee, you said, I see your hand up. You're recognized by the chair. I think you muted Dr. McKee. I can't hear you.
I apologize. I think that
No problem.
our fellow executive committee member was making this motion to try to work to a space where we can be inclusive of the items. And so by combining 1 and 3, I will ask if Ms. Bazil will be willing to restate her motion once the executive committee agrees to allow 1 and 2 to be combined. Will that require me to motion to have 1 and 2 to be combined, or can we go back with the understanding that they will, and then ask that Ms. Bazil restate her motion?
We can have the motion combined. It just would be at the pleasure of the committee, but we can have them combined. That would make sure that we in detail in the process. Kim, I recognize you. Your hand is up. You may.
Thank you. If I understand this correctly, the LeCan leaders got together and they recommended the top 2, the grade-in items. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so the last 2 were just on there for informational purposes. They were like running a close second.
Yes, they were there as potential alternates.
Potential alternate. Okay. Okay, thank you.
So what be the pleasure of the executive committee? Dr. McKee, I see your hand up. You're recognized.
I'm asking if Ms. Bazil will be willing to restate her motion with the understanding that we can combine 1 and 3. And if that is the case, I'm asking if she would consider restating her motion for the executive committee to consider.
So just so that everybody knows, what I just placed on the screen is I was just moving all of these things into one document so people could see. The original motion by Ms. Bazil did not have the data and accountability in there, so I can take it out, but I did put it in just because it was being discussed right now. But these were the 4 items in the motion by Ms. Bazil. If she would like to revise her original motion to include the data and accountability, she can do so.
Ms. Bazil, I see your hand. You're recognized by the chair.
Thank you. I have.
You just muted.
You're muted.
Sorry, I don't mind revising it, but I do not believe anyone seconded my motion, so I'm not even sure that my motion is on the floor.
No, it died. That's why we needed you to look at it and read. It died. You didn't.
It died.
Then yes, I'm good with this. So I would like to make the motion as presented on the screen.
It's been moved by Ms. Kim Bazil to move to accept those are the agenda items of cameras in special education classrooms and data and accountability of cameras in special education classrooms. Also the APK exception, families paid caregiver funding for comprehension dental for adults with IDD, and support LAPIE's legislation to fund post-secondary programs. I read that for those that may not be able to see it. Do we have a second? Jill, your hand up.
I don't have a second. I have a question, but Ms. Larson, is that allowed?
No, dispose of the motion, or if we get a second, then you all can have more discussion.
Well, then I guess I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Kim Bazil, second by Ms. Jill Hayno. Now we're for question.
Miss Nicole has her hand up.
Vice Chair Banks.
All right, thank you. Okay, so those are just the items that were recommended, those top two. So I hear what Ms. Kim is saying, but we forgot all about the Families Helping Families with their funding. They brought this to us earlier today, and we didn't even recommend anything for them, and they are doing good work over there too. So they're not even included up in our recommendation at all. Am I clear about that, or did I miss it? Because I didn't hear them at all.
They were not a part, their concerns were not a part of the motion.
All right, we also have a comment from Ms. Kelly Monroe. She says, what about the other exceptions?
For Appendix K.
Okay, Ms. Monroe, you're recognized.
Okay. No, I was just wondering, like in the beginning, they were talking about the 3 exceptions, and I just saw on the screen there was just the 1. Are you taking off the other 2 because of the rulemaking possibility, or was it always just the keeping the legally responsible adult as the DSP? Just curious.
In LaCan's recommendations, they focused on family as paid caregiver.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's been moved in second, and we've had question. Do we have any more questions in regard to the motion? Okay. Are we ready to vote? Ms. Larson, correct me if I'm wrong. Oh, I apologize. Jill Hayno, I see your hand up. You're recognized.
Oh, I'm very behind, and I apologize for seconding this. I just saw a comment in the chat and knew that I wanted Miss Kelly's comment to be heard before we said this, and that's the only reason why I seconded. But I kind of echo Nicole Banks's concern, like, I think this is hard, y'all, cause I think we definitely, if we know that we're gonna have to advocate for FHF funding every year to continue, then I feel kind of awkward not having it be continued on our agenda because the DD council did so I don't know, because they're all so important. Can I I don't know. Like, because I don't want us to go in to the full council meeting tomorrow in the FHF funding not be mentioned. But as far as like motions and amendments and friendly, that's beyond me. But I just don't feel comfortable not for the full council not to have the FHF funding the extension of FHF funding be presented to the full council tomorrow.
I understand your concern, Jill, and it's noted. Kim Bazil, I see your hand up. You're recognized.
I want to preface this by saying I know I'm on Bayou Land Family Help and Family Board, and I'm not trying to sway anything. I just want to make a comment and get clarification from Amy. Amy, did you not say that additional funding to keep that 500,000 would have to be part of the DD Council budget, and that you are working on that currently?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
So that means we would not have to vote. That would not be part of this motion. Is that correct?
So it's just our fault. So this, never mind, sorry.
It does not have to be. You could choose to still try to address it through a legislative advocacy agenda item, or otherwise I am trying to address it through our LDH budgetary process.
Thank you.
Then let's go with that, since I don't know, y'all. They're all so good. I say if we can, is getting the funds to FHF is the most, is my bottom line. Like, if we can get the funding and not without it being an advocacy agenda, legislative agenda item, then I'm okay with that.
Right. Two things. Let me remind everybody. One, that we still have a motion on the floor. And second, let's make sure that we're recognized by the chair before we make comments. Vice Chair Nicole Banks, I see your hand, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. So to piggyback what Kim said to Ms. Amy, so the funding for Families Helping Families, we don't have to vote upon that as legislative. You can do that through the budgetary process, right? So we don't necessarily have to vote on it, right?
Right. I met with Commissioner Darden, who informed me that continuing that additional funding would need to be a part of our budgetary process. So I have made the request. We're at the very beginning stages of our budgetary process. I can't guarantee that it will happen, but I am making the attempt.
Okay, so if it doesn't end up getting approved, I just want to get everything laid out. If it doesn't get approved with the Families Helping Family with the continuing funding, then do we have to wait a whole nother year for us to bring this back up to the legislative agenda because they're only working off of, let's just say we don't vote the families and helping families this time, and we just do the budgetary thing and it doesn't work. And will we have to present that again within the next year because we're voting on this stuff as a part of a year funding thing, or we could bring it up to the council at the next meeting and do it like that?
Yeah, Britton put in the chat box that if funding for the Families Helping Families is important to council members, we can consider this as something to advocate for as sort of a contingency should the budget be released and the funding isn't included.
Okay. So we could kind of play it either or. We could do the budget or we could do the legislative thing. So we just have to decide which one we actually want to do. I just wanted to make that clear so everybody that's a part of the voting process understands, what we're all voting for and what can be allocated for this time and what, could probably be saved for another time.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for those comments.
Hey, Ms. Mary,
We have
I'm sorry, Ms. Mary Jacobs, an attendee, has her hand raised.
okay, Ms. Jacobs, you're recognized by the chair.
Thank you. I was just wondering if Amy could explain that process. Is it that you will submit a budget with that money in it and it will remain in it unless the legislator comes back or somebody comes back and says you'll have to cut your budget?
Yes. So I submitted as a part of our normal budget. And if LDH is looking to make cuts, then they, cut in a variety of places. So I don't know exactly where they would cut. The amount of money that we send, or the increased amount of money that we send to the Families Helping Family Centers is relatively small change in comparison to the overall LDH budget.
Right.
But that does not necessarily mean that it won't be looked at. So it's, yes, I send it in as a normal part of our budget. And then I, beg and plead,
right,
like I do for all of our money, and then we see
what
LDH gives us.
Yeah, I mean, in the perfect scenario, we keep hearing we're going to have this big, huge slush fund this year. So if we're lucky, nothing will be cut. Everything will be funded. We know that really won't probably happen, but if they were to cut though, it could be a possibility. It's not even all cut. It could just be that if they come back and say you have to cut 10% of your budget out or whatever, and it could be that of that 500,000, there's only maybe 400 of it left or something, and people could still get more. I'm just trying to get the picture, make sure everybody understands that. I personally, now I don't, just to be totally transparent here, we don't get money from the DD Council, but I'd certainly worry about my sister agencies and making sure they're always financially viable. But I think that I feel pretty confident that in this year, now I won't say this most years, but this year that there's a better chance than not, it's not going to be cut if it's submitted in there. So that's why I just wanted to make sure I did understand that process.
Right, thank you for that. Okay, we're kind of deviating. Still want to remind everybody we have a motion on the floor and we're at a second. If we don't have any more public comment in regards to it, and I understand something, my friends, this is very difficult because at the end of the day, everything is priority. Everything is priority. Make no mistake about it. And no decision that we make is going to be foolproof. It's not going to be complete 100% satisfaction. What we have to do is we have to try to make a decision based upon those things that we know we can move forward with that can be presented before the agenda. Like I said, there was 93 items. And unfortunately, it's a sifting process because if we overload legislators with too much, then we find ourselves not making any progress. So I just want to kind of refresh everybody's memory about why we have those agendas, while the candidates presented where we are and those things that have been presented and that motion that's been second. So now we're time for a vote. If we don't have any more comments, Amy, am I missing anything?
Miss Susan Rain has her hand raised.
Okay. Ms. Rain, you're recognized by the chair.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make it clear that in the past, unless something has drastically changed, if there are cuts to the DD Council budget, it's only taken from the Families Helping Families funds because that's their only state dollars, the state dollars that go to us. Thanks.
And Ms. Karanda Corley has her hand raised as well.
Corley, you're recognized by the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Executive Committee. I would like for us to strongly consider that when we look at the agenda items that we're gonna propose to the full council, that we actually consider the funding source that we're gonna use. And then that would actually allow us to actually play with what items we want to actually have as legislative items. I agree. Families Helping Families has always been a huge asset for individuals with disabilities throughout our state. And to see them not listed as one of our agenda items give me great pause and great concerns. Secondly, I know that Appendix K exception, that is going to come from federal funding under Medicaid, dealing with the waivers, and this cameras in the special ed classrooms and the data and accountability, that would actually come up under IDEA and ESSA funding. So I just think that if maybe we look at what funding sources we would actually have each of these things coming from, then that would actually allow us to see what other legislative items we would like to propose and prioritize them effectively so that our disabilities community is not left out in the cold without anything. That's my biggest concern. And if our Families Helping Families is not funded, then we would have a huge, huge loss throughout the state. So I just really strongly encourage us to reconsider adding Families Helping Families, but also if we can actually put by each one, if we know what funding source, that we do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Ms. Corley. So at this point, I'm ready to move with the vote. We've had a motion and we've had a second. Do we have anyone abstaining from this vote, or do we have any amendments to the motion? Let me correct that. Do we have any abstaining from this vote that's currently on the floor? Due to the passion of this conversation, I'm going to call for a roll call vote. Amy, if you will.
Sure. Nicole Banks,
No.
Dr. McKee,
Yes.
Kim Bazile,
Yes.
Jill Hano, Jill Hano.
Yes.
Okay. You have 3 yes votes and 1 no.
Okay. Motion carries. The next item of business is the reallotment. We already there. Okay, now we're up to the reallotment of the Puerto Rico.
Yes, we're up to reallotment of funds.
Okay.
Let me find my.
Puerto Rico.
Okay. We have funds that were reallotted from Puerto Rico in the amount of $31,983. We also have funds that were not expended from last year's contracts, mainly due to people not being able to travel, which really affected people's ability to use up all the money in their contracts. So that amount was $65,923.05. So we currently have $97,906.05 that we need to reallocate. Funds need to be reallocated to activities that are already funded within our annual work plan. We have had some of our contractors express an interest in receiving some additional funds. Interaction Advisory Group, who is doing our first responder trainings, has requested an additional $25,920 for the year. And in return, they would increase their planned trainings from 12 to 24. So they'd add an additional training every year. Niagara University, who is doing emergency response trainings, would also welcome additional funds. They didn't give an exact amount. The ARC also said that they would welcome additional funds. I don't have an exact amount for them either, although I do believe Kelly's on the call. So if she has any ideas or any specific suggestions, she could speak up. I don't know the easiest way to do this. So I had Hannah kind of create a spreadsheet for me. It will be difficult to see because there's just so much on it. But basically, these are the activities that are currently funded in our work plan. So we have our videos activity that O'Neill Communications is doing. They're currently funded at $51,000. Our supported decision-making trainings that are being done through the ARC, they're funded at $50,000. People First providing trainings for self-advocacy, it's $25,000. This particular activity probably does not need any additional funds, so I'm actually going to do that. Trach Mamas has funds for in time for rapid response during times of natural disasters or states of emergency. IAG, we already talked about, and Niagara as well. LaPi currently receives $40,000. They're the alliance that's doing the work on the post-secondary education and trying to get those programs into additional colleges in the state. The ARC receives $25,000 for customized employment training. And then O'Neill Communications has another contract where they're doing employment seminars, and they currently receive $32,000.
Okay. Dr. McKee, I see your hand is raised. You're recognized by the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did we put out an email or did we inform our contractors that we may possibly have some additional funding that we may possibly could allocate? And did we get a response from them? What was the responses that you just showed us prior to this spreadsheet? The only responses you got after you put out a request, if anyone was looking to needing more funding? And I have a second part of that question.
Yes, we did, because we knew that we didn't know how much money we would have. We knew we would at least have that $31,000 from Puerto Rico. Brenton just put in the comments too that Niagara actually did request an additional $20,000 to $25,000. We did contact our contractors. I'm not 100% sure that O'Neill was contacted. Just because of staffing. But yes, we did let them know that we would probably have some money available. We just didn't know how much at the time.
And then I have a second part to the question as well. Do we have I mean, I know that our contractors provide consistent reporting as to how they are spending the existing funds. My question is, have we received reports from all of these contractors on their status and how they are spending the existing money that has been allocated to them thus far?
Yes, we receive monthly reports from our contractors. That information is compiled and put into the status report that that is attached to the full council agenda.
So with that being said, I don't want to just take all of this funding and just allocate it to one activity just because that contractor replied to email timely or put in the amount. I don't want it to be like, oh, you can go to the D council and ask for 50,000. And all I did is just ask and they gave it to me. I want to be mindful that if we do have this surplus of money, that at a minimum, that if all the contractors are spending their money as they promised and as it is outlined in the contract appropriately, I would like to entertain the idea of equitably distributing the money before just allocating all the money to one activity just because that individual put in their money and put in their request of what they think they need. I really don't want to lean, or seem like one particular contractor is deserving from this blessing of surplus that we have and another one missed out. So I'm not sure how we're going to proceed with this, but that would be my recommendation.
Okay, recommendation recognized, Ms. McKee, Dr. McKee. Ms. Bazile, your hand is up, you're recognized.
I agree with Hyacinth, and I think we do it equitably like she suggested. And what we do is, can we add up all these contracts and do it on a percent basis? If somebody was 10%, they get 10%. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes.
I'm not quite understanding what you mean, but I can, we can add up the people who have contracts and equitably divide the money based off of the number of contracts that we have available for this additional funding. Does that make sense? That probably wasn't a great way to explain it.
So if we add up the contracts that are able to receive this additional funding and get a total, and then say one was 5,000, we take the 5,000 over the total and that's a percent, and we apply that percent to the 96,000. And that's their portion of the funds that they would get.
Okay.
Vice Chair Banks, I see your hand is up, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going off of what Ms. Kim was saying. She explained it how I thought she was, what she was talking about, add up all the numbers, do a percentage, and then whoever should get the percentage of what, the 97 dollars like that. So yeah, she explained it, but we were talking about the same thing.
Okay. Do we have any more questions from council members before we go to public comment? Dr. McKee, you're recognized. You're muted, Dr. McKee.
This has been having everyone all day. I think because we're at Zoom fatigue, y'all. We've been doing this since 8:30 this morning. So please accept our apologies, public, for our mute and unmute challenges today. I'm moving that we take this surplus of this funding that's been presented to us and distribute it equitably among all of the contractors and to cover all of the activities that are listed in front of us.
Sorry, now I'm having muting problems. Okay, we have a motion on the floor.
I second it.
Before or still need to hear from the public comment first. We heard from the council members, but we want to make sure we hear from public comment because that may have an influence on the decisions that are made. Dr. McKee, if you're in agreement with that.
No problem, no problem. I was just making a motion, no problem.
Yes, ma'am. Amy, do we have any public comment in regards to the topic at hand?
All right, Mr. Charles Michelle has his hand up.
Michelle, you're recognized by the chair.
Thank you very much. And I don't know, I may have missed something during the conversation, but I was wondering, perhaps instead of divvying it up among all of the activities, if there's enough time, what about doing some sort of an ancillary RFP so that people can say if they need more money and what they would do with it? There's certainly, it's going to be probably more deliverables like we're talking about with all of those. And then divide the money up among those who have a plan for it and who actually need it. That's just my thought. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for that comment.
All right, Ms. Karonda Corley has her hand up.
Ms. Corley, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I asked the question on whether or not these funds can be dispersed to our Families Open Family Centers, simply because we know that they have quite a bit of deliverables to actually meet, as well as we know that their funding gets cut. And we do know that our executive director just said that she was looking into trying to get them more funding, but that may not become a reality. And considering that we did not include them in our legislative agenda as an item for the agenda, then I think that it would be extremely prudent of us to consider actually dispersing the monies to them so that they can it can help them with actually meeting their deliverables as needed. We do know that legislative roundtables will be coming up in January. Maybe LaCan can actually use the extra funding. But we also know that a lot of our Families Open Family Centers were impacted by hurricanes Delta, Laura, and Ida. So I really and truly have a great pause when it comes to just disseminating money to other entities that have not shown us any actual report for what they have done thus far. And I'm just not really big on just handing them some extra money. I do think that if we're going to choose anything else other than allowing Families Open Families and LaCan, whom we know can actually utilize that funding, I do yield to doing what Dr. Michelle actually gave the option of, which is to have them actually submit more documentation of what they plan on utilizing that funding for. But again, my very first option is Families Open Families and LaCan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Corley, for those comments. Dr. McKee, I see your hand up. You're recognized by the chair.
I just want to make sure that I'm understanding that our executive director said that all of the contractors did submit reports and they send the reports to us monthly, timely outlining what they are doing with the funding that has been allocated to them, correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
So with that being said, I motion to, is it okay for me to motion, or are we still in discussion?
Do we have any more comments from the council? Hold that for just a minute, Dr. McKee, because I'm having you restate your motion and then we'll move forward from there. I just want to make sure that we're getting our public comment out the way before we come to any kind of closure decision. Do we have any more comments from any council members? I don't see anything. What about from the public?
Miss Kathy Dwyer has her hand up.
Okay. Ms. Dwyer, you're recognized by the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to agree with Karanda's comment about allocating those funds to FHF centers, especially those that were impacted by the hurricanes, and wanted to know if they were considered at all, or were they contacted to see if they had any needs. I would hope the centers impacted by hurricanes would be a priority for any financial help they may need. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Do we have any more hands raised or any public comment?
I will say about giving money to FHF. They're currently funded under state general funds, and the money that we're talking about now is federal grant funds. So it's two different sources of money. I do not believe that this money can go to the FHF centers. I can double check on that, but I don't believe that this money can.
Okay. If you will, check on that, because we see that's a very point of interest for many of the FHFs and those representatives that are part of the attending this meeting. I also see Jill Hano's hand. Jill, you're recognized. Then after that, I see Kathy Dwyer.
I'm definitely on board with what everyone's saying, and I don't wanna give out money to give out money, and I could be way off base and not reading the room, but I like the contractors are off the when a contractor when a contractor requests more money from us, I pay attention every quarter to each contractor's deliverables in our committee meeting in July. The guy from NU pitched to us for more funding, and he specified, I'm gonna use this amount of funding for this, and this, and go with this place, that place, and I thought it was a good pitch, so I didn't see a problem, but like, I mean, I'm gonna read a contract or like listen to why are you asking for this money before I hand out whatever this is, like, and I mean, I tend to base money on if it's gonna be well used, or your I look at performance in proposals before you make a wise decision on whether to or not to allocate the funds. And with what Kim said, like, y'all talked about the percentage to this contractor and then an equal percentage to the contractors. And I mean, my only thing is, what if, like, we have contracts that are good on funding. I mean, if I'm good on funding, like in my parents want to give me 50 grand, I'll be like, okay. But you see what I'm saying? Like, how can we, I do want to be fair, but if, like, if we divide it equally, like, then then won't we be giving funds to contractors that don't necessarily need it? Or is my like way off base here? Because that's just my 2 cents, but I could once again not know what I'm talking about. But that's just my opinion.
Thank you for that, Jill. And it's not, and we don't tell you anything that's saying you don't know what you're talking about. When you're passing about a subject, everybody understands that. Ms. Dry, I saw your hand after Jill Hano. You have the floor if your hand is still up. I can't quite tell from where I'm standing.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I just wanted to agree with you that I think it would be important for the DD Council to look into seeing if the FHF centers could receive the funding, being federal funding. I know when I worked for years for the sister agency at the Human Development Center, managing the grants and contracts office, and also received the grants from, well, at that time it was the Administration of Developmental Disabilities, but I understand it's Administration for Community Living now. Even if the current funds may not quite meet the scope of work, which I would think there were some guidelines provided, you could request a revision that it be used for another scope of work, given that these funds were given to you, new funds, or any funds left over. And given the recent hurricanes in particular, I hate to keep bringing that up. I know the Help and Family Centers have been having to provide extra support and services and outreach to try to get families the supports they need. So I would think there should be some way to request approval for funds to be dispersed to the FHF centers. So hopefully there is. I just wanted to add that little 2 cents, but thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And again, we're going to have the executive director check into it, because I know the Families Helping Families are state funded, and those are federal funds, and we don't want to dismiss anybody from receiving any kind of services, because we do realize that many agencies have been impacted by all of the hiccups that we've had in Louisiana, whether it be from COVID-19, hurricanes, or along those lines. So make no mistake about it, by nowhere we trying to short anybody. Again, we're not trying to make this Shark Tank either, where just like what Dr. McKee said, where anyone just feels like just because they were the most prompt in response doesn't make them completely eligible for those, because we want to make sure that we do a unique review for qualifications. But at this time, Dr. McKee, I'm going to ask that you restate your motion so we can move forward with the agenda. Dr. McKee, I see you have your hand up. You recognize.
Look at the mute again. It's the mute monster. I apologize. So I'm really, really, really going to restate my motion, and I'm going to try to see if I can word it in a way that can capture what was heard by the public, as well as what I am trying to put together. And it may not be what our executive committee might, but please feel free to amend it or reject it and then amend it. So my motion is for the executive committee to direct the staff or the executive director to look and see if these dollars can be allocated to families helping family centers who were impacted by the hurricanes. And so I want to make sure that that is clear in there. So that will be I believe that will be the first motion, but it might be a semicolon. So I may need help at 5 o'clock today. As being the priority. If we do determine or find out that those federal dollars cannot be allocated to families helping family centers who have been impacted by the hurricanes, then I would like for for the executive committee to distribute the funds equitably among all of the contractors that that are involved, that we're dealing with right now, that we're working with on our planning. So I hope I clearly stated that, but that is the motion that's on the floor right now.
Thank you, Dr. McKee. Before we go any further, I want to make sure I had that for clarification. So, Dr. McKee, you're saying that as far as this goes, we're going to look and see at the executive director to check and see if the families helping families can receive any of those funds. And if not, we'll move forward with distribution equitably among those agencies that are already contracted. Did I understand that correctly?
That is correct. That is the best paraphrase that I can offer at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Dr. McKee, can I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
You stated that you wanted the money to be allocated to the FHF centers that were affected by the hurricanes.
That were impacted.
Yep. So does that mean taking the full amount of the money to be allocated and dispersing it to those centers?
So that will be the priority. If we can disperse those, if we finally find out that those federal dollars can go to those FHF centers that were impacted by the hurricanes, I would like to be able to disperse those funds to them equitably as well, right? I want to make sure that all of those FHF centers who were impacted by the hurricane gets first priority access to the funds if we're able to distribute these federal funds to those centers. If not, then we need to move to the latter.
Okay.
So we have the motion. I see Vice Chair Nicole Banks, you have your hand up. You recognize by the chair.
And thank you, Chair. Dr. McKee, I was asking a question. So the whole 97,000, you want that all to go to the hurricane centers if they receive federal funding. And from reading the comments, Ms. Susan is saying that they can receive federal funding. So you want all 97,000 to go just to the.
Just a minute, Vice Chair Banks. Before we go too far with that, we do have the motion. Let's see if we have a second. Then we'll go into question, which pretty much sounds like where you're going with that conversation.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor to look and see if. Then I'm gonna paraphrase the motion to look and see if the FHS that have been impacted be first priority and moving forward with those allocated funds. If not qualified, then we'll distribute them amongst those other contractors. Do we have a second? Not hearing a second, then the motion dies. Okay, now Ms. Vice Chair Banks, you can go with your comment.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was asking. So, well, it got died. So, I mean, I guess my question is irrelevant now because the motion died. But, can I make a motion?
All means.
Okay, I motion that the executive committee present to the executive director that the additional funds, be allocated to all of our contractors in respect to what is priority to the council as a whole. in regards to the percentages that Ms. Kim was talking about earlier. That way everybody is covered.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Can I ask a clarifying question of Ms. Banks?
Is it
Yes,
going
ma'am.
to the motion?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Ms. Banks, is this us going back to basically looking at the percentages of how our money is currently allocated and taking this new money and allocating in the same way? Wonderful. That's what I needed to know.
Yes, ma'am. That's exactly what I mean.
Thank you.
Again, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? Not hearing the second, the motion dies. So what would be the pleasure of the executive committee? Dr. McKee, you're recognized.
I just want to try my best to restate my motion and ask the committee to consider what the public is asking us to do. I had a motion that I, had in mind first, but then after hearing both sides of the argument from the public, and their concerns as it relates to what the needs are in their respective communities, I'm just going to ask the committee to really consider passing a motion, that will be best suited to make sure that everyone that we discussed is receiving access and opportunity to the surplus of money that we have. And so with that being said, I am going to pose my motion again, and I will ask that the executive committee consider hearing it, and if it dies, it dies. So I would like this opportunity to present my motion again.
You have the floor.
So the motion is to check and see if the surplus of federal money, federal dollars, can be distributed to our Families Helping Family centers who have been impacted by the hurricanes. That's first priority, number one. If we find out that those monies can be distributed, I'm asking that we distribute this surplus of funding to our Families Helping Family centers who've been impacted by the hurricane equitably. If it is not able to be done that way, I'm asking that the funds be distributed equitably using the formula that Ms. Bazile proposed to the executive committee.
We have a motion on the floor. Do I hear a second? Not hearing a second, the motion dies. Dr. McKee, I see your hand up. You're recognized.
No, I got a
You're
phone
muted, Dr.
call.
McKee.
I second the motion.
Oh, Jill.
Oh, I
She
apologize.
seconded.
I apologize.
I was on the phone. I'm so sorry.
Oh, thank
Okay.
you, Ms. Hano. I
Thank
was
you,
going to make
thank you,
another
Ms.
motion.
Hano. Okay, so to bring back into correction, we had a motion on the floor by Dr. McKee. It was seconded by Jill Hano.
I'm bad.
Do we have any public comment? In the chat box, Amy?
Miss Susan Ryan has her hand raised.
Okay. Ms. Rain, you recognize.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate it. I just wanted to clear up the federal funds just because I've been here for a long time. The federal Families Helping Families of Southwest Louisiana does receive federal funds for the LACAN program. And for just history, real quick, DDC started us, Families Helping Families, and gave us federal funding for several years. After a while, they were cited because there was some type of ruling that the DDC could not give continued funding for continued operations of a program or a center like ours or anything like that. Long story short, that's where the money got allocated from the legislature for the Families Helping Family Centers, and that's why it got allocated. So we can receive and have received federal funds for programs, not for continued operation of the center. So it would have to be, in my understanding, and I'm not anybody who's just besides someone who's been around for a while, my understanding is it just can't be for general center operations. So.
Okay, thank you for that input, Ms. Rain. So we have a motion on the floor. It's moved in second. Now I'm ready to call for a vote. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Let me clarify before I apologize. Let me back up. I was premature. Do we have any objections? Do we have anyone that's abstaining?
Kim Bazile is abstaining.
Okay, Kim Bazile is abstaining. Vice Chair Banks, I see you have your hand up. You're recognized.
Okay, so let me just get it real clear because I don't want to vote wrong. We're moving to see if they can get federal funding. So if they are able to get the federal funding, all of the money is going to go to Families Helping Families, correct?
Correct. Not all of the centers, only the centers impacted by hurricanes.
Right. So only the ones that's impacted by hurricanes. And Miss Mary put up in the comments, and I'm just reading because I'm reading all of the comments too. Is the clarification when you talk about impacted, is this helping the centers or helping the families that the centers are serving?
The comment. No, go ahead.
Well, this is the comment that was in there, and I understand what they're saying. Like, are we helping just the centers? Are they helping the families that serve the centers? Then, I mean, it would behoove us to think that the centers would use the money for the families, and like Miss Susan just refreshed our information about how Families Helping Families work. We can't use it for center. What is the word I want to use? The center, the day operations for the center. Is that correct? I'm just making sure.
That is what Susan said, yes.
Okay, so if this money that will be allocated to them will help with the rebuilding process or help our families that has been impacted by the hurricane?
If what Susan said is what is true, then the money would have to be for a targeted program. So they wouldn't be able to use that to help rebuild a building or for general daily operation. It would have to be used for a program.
Okay, so it would be programmatic. So now that we have the vote on the floor, we have a motion, we have a second, we've had one abstain. All in favor, say by saying aye.
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 Any any noes?
No.
Okay.
You have 2 yeses and 1 no.
Okay, so motion passes. The next item of business is the membership committee recommendation.
Miss Jacob speak. And
I'm sorry, Jill. I didn't recognize. What did you say?
I'm sorry to talk out of turn. Can Miss Jacob speak and I'm positive it's on this issue?
Mary Jacobs, you're recognized.
I was just trying to speak before y'all took the vote. I just wanted to mention that, and depending on what happens with everything, that after Katrina, the DD Council had, because y'all got the money from Puerto Rico, that's why I'm thinking of this. The DD Council got money from a lot of other DD councils around the country. I'm not sure if that was just donated funds. If I remember right, I thought it was federal funds that they sent to them that was maybe unspent or something that was used to provide for families that had lost a lot of stuff and they needed support and replacing items. And I was trying to get that message out there that if that's something that could be done, depending on what can and can't be done with the money, that was something that was actually done after Katrina. And I want to say it was probably close to around $100,000 that was spent. Now, for my own personal gain here, I want to tell you that we don't get money from y'all, but I would hope if y'all did do something like that, that you would give some money for the families in my region to one of the centers. So, because we do have a lot of families in our region too that were impacted that could probably use that, especially when you look at Lower Jefferson Parish and Lafitte area. But that's all I really wanted to say.
Okay, thank you for those comments.
You're welcome.
Okay, so now we moved up to the next order of business, which is the membership committee recommendations.
Yes, I'm not sure if Dr. McKee wants to speak to this because she chaired the committee, or if she wants for me to just run through it.
You feel free to run through it and I can jump in at any time.
Okay. The membership committee met. We had 6 seats to fill. 6 people were recommended to fill the seats that we have. 3 that are currently open, 3 that come open, 4 that are currently open and 2 that will come open in November. The 6 people here and in the agenda that is online, their bios are linked. So if everyone, I can pull bios up and we can look at them, or however, but every person who was interviewed and rated was given a perfect score on the rating matrix. So the 6 people who were recommended by the committee are 3 self-advocates because we had 3 self-advocate seats open, and 3 people of color to try to help meet our diversity requirements as stated by the DD Act. So the 6 people who were recommended by membership committee are Angela Harmon, Cheney Guidry, Christy Gonzalez, Kimona Hogan, Logan Davis, and Vivian Webb.
Okay. So you see the names of those who've been recommended by the membership committee. Do we have any council members with any questions? Hey, my friends, let me explain. Let me say this real quick. Time is well far spent. So for those who have comments, let's try to limit them to 3 minutes because we're over time. And we just want to be considerate of everybody's time because I know a lot of people are probably exhausted from having a full day. Kim Bazile, your hand is up.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion that the executive committee accepts the recommendations from the membership committee of the 6 listed candidates, and they go forth to council.
Okay, motion has been made. There's no need for a second. Doesn't require a second. Thank you for that, Ms. Bazile. Let's see, where are we on our agenda? Do we still have a quorum, Amy?
We do still have a quorum.
Okay. Okay, so I lost my place. Where are we at?
Ms. Hano has her hand raised before we move.
Okay. Joanna, you're recognized by the chair.
Thank you. You said 4. You said 4 are currently open and 2 will become open, or did I get that backwards?
Nope, you're right.
4 open, 2 will be open.
Yes.
Let me write that before I forget.
So now the next item of business is the quorum and standing and ad hoc committee meeting.
This was an item that was requested to be placed on the agenda by Dr. McKee.
Mr. Chair, if I could have 1 minute of the floor's time. I know we're way over our time. So can I have 1 minute to speak to this?
Dr. McKee, you're recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. It's concerning that when we are fulfilling a commitment to
Dr.
serve-
McKee, I apologize. Before I get ahead of myself, we didn't call a vote for the recommendation on the committee members, did we?
Oh.
The new council committee members?
You know what? I don't think we did.
I apologize.
It's okay. It's been listen, I'm with you. It's been a long day, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair. Let's go back. No problem.
I apologize. So it was on the motion. The motion was made by Kim Bazile. Do we have a second?
Second by Dr. McKee.
Second by Dr. McKee. Any question? No question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any noes? Okay. This recommendation we presented before the full council. Now, Dr. McKee, I apologize.
No, Mr. Chair, thank you for your time. My concern is just coming from a place of when we are signed on as a commitment to be present at these meetings and recognizing that it does take time. It is a commitment, but it is a promise to the public that we attend and show up at these standing meetings and these ad hoc committee meetings. And I find it very concerning that individuals put a lot of time, work, and dedication to put these meetings on. The expectation of the public is to see us present, and then we get to a place where we don't have a quorum and we can't vote on important items that need to be shared. And I'm concerned about the issues of chairs trying to get a quorum at different meetings. I'm also concerned about attendance of members, and I believe that is made public and is on the council's agenda tomorrow, the attendance of council members. But I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the executive committee, the concerns of having a quorum. Additionally, I want to, along with this, is adhering to virtual protocols. I do believe that there are times when we have the cameras off a little longer than we should have them on. I know that in the Zoom world, there's so many different things that goes on that can distract us. But it seems like it's starting to be a pattern where there are more individuals who are on the committees or on the panels with cameras being off for an extended period of time. And so I would like to offer this to the committee to help us get back to a place where we are committed to coming to these meetings. coming committed with our Zoom cameras on, ready for the questions from the public. And then hopefully we can start transitioning and developing a plan once all of this happens to transition back into in-person, because I do believe the Zoom environment has become a challenge. And just maybe if we are back in person, we would have more of that human connectedness and spirit that you usually get when you're in an in-person meeting. So I had added this to the agenda as a way to bring it to the attention of the executive committee and council. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. McKee, and I wholeheartedly agree with you in regards to that. Do we have a motion so that we can bring this before the council?
Since it was largely just expressing concerns, I believe it
Okay.
can just be restated at the full council and doesn't need a motion.
Okay, good. And let me say this while at the executive committee meeting, and for those who are on public, we really appreciate what you do because everyone here is volunteer. And the reason we do what we do is because most of us have a face attached to why we're here. So, you know, sometimes we just have to be reminded about that face that we see, whether it be the face in the mirror or the face that we kiss goodnight, or the face that we take to school. So sometimes it's good to be reminded on why we do what we do. So we're definitely going to make sure that we bring this before the entire council, because quorums are important. Because when we fall short of trying to meet a benchmark with the legislators, because we didn't have enough people to vote, then it falls back on us. We're personally accountable for that. So then it's like I'm betraying the love of my son, or you're betraying the love of whoever your interest is here. So let's just make sure we stay focused on that. Even though we're over time, we still do this because we're passionate. No one's here for social status. No one's here to be popular. Matter of fact, we're not here to be liked. We're here to get the job done. So let's make sure we keep that in mind. Moving forward to the next order of business is the Executive Director Performance Review. I see it. Jill Hano, your hand is recognized.
If a question, and I don't know if this is in order or not, because it is a question about something I saw on the membership committee agenda, and I'll get to my other question for you tomorrow, Dr. McKee, but I was trying to compare the membership application to the PIP application. Is the partners and policy making application not on the DD Council website?
I don't think that it's currently on the website. No, I just received a version of it yesterday.
Makes sense.
Okay, Jill, your question satisfied? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Your hand.
Yeah, my hand was raised because I had also put the next item on the agenda.
Okay. Did I overlook something?
No.
Okay. So now we're up to the Executive Director's Performance Review. Dr. McKee, I see your hand. You're recognized.
Thank you. Being that we are on a strict time deadline, typically the Executive Director Performance Review is conducted in executive session. And I do not have the time today to actually do a thorough look-see and also to go into executive session. I don't even know if we still have a quorum to do such a task. But it is on there because it is something that is pressing, time sensitive, something that we do have to, I believe, get completed before December. So really the next time we meet won't be until January. So if we do not get to this item today, which it doesn't appear that we will, we may need to move this and have an executive committee meeting, convene a special executive committee meeting, inclusive of executive session to be open during that meeting to discuss the executive director performance review. So I just wanted to share that with the executive committee that this is something that's time sensitive and we do need to get to. So I don't know if I should motion to table it, this discussion to call an emergency executive committee meeting prior to the deadline of when the performance review is due. That's something that I'm willing to do if I need to.
Hold that thought for just a moment. I see Banks hand. I'm gonna see is it in relation to what you're about to bring forth. Vice Chair Banks, you recognize.
Thank you, Chair. It is. I was reading the bylaws, and she is right. We have to have this information. We're supposed to really have it in every quarter. And I know that she's new and we didn't even get to meet, but we should call an emergency meeting so that we can get this evaluation and process so that we are following our bylaws.
I definitely agree because it's definitely a time sensitive issue. Do we have any more comments?
I have a question. Ms. Learson might be able to answer it. If a special executive committee meeting is called for this agenda item, does it still need to go to full council for final vote and approval?
That was going to be my next question as well. Ms. Learson, can you shed some light on that for us, please? What the protocols would be?
Yes. If there is a motion to postpone this item to a special meeting or special called meeting by the executive committee, it does not require a need to go to the full council. You would just simply need someone to make that motion to postpone this item to a special meeting to be called at a date determined by the executive council.
Okay, thank you for that.
And then please keep in mind that the special meeting is called expressly for this purpose. So there should be no other agenda items for that special meeting. It would be called expressly for the purpose of this agenda item. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And I'm gonna re-echo what Ms. Learson just said. We are able to make a motion to postpone by executive session. It would not have to go before the council, but this is something very time sensitive. So if we have a motion, we would need to make a motion for it to be determined, but we need to get on this expeditiously because we're moving into the holidays and everybody's schedules are already busy. We don't want to put off any kind of and be uncompliant. So at this time, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
It's been moved. Do we have a second?
I second it.
Okay, it's been moved and second. It's been moved by Dr. McKee, second by Vice Chair.
You're on mute, Mr. Chair.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm sorry. The wonderful world of technology. It's been moved by Dr. McKee and second by Vice Chair Banks that we postpone the executive director's performance review for a special executive session with a date to be determined. And I'll ask the executive director to do a doodle poll to find out about the first conveniences of everyone. That way we can go ahead and make this happen, especially now that we know that this does not have to go before the full council. All in favor by saying any abstentions? Any objections? All in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any noes? Motion carries. Ms. DeVille, if you will, take that upon yourself for us to be able to do a doodle poll to find out the executive committee's earliest convenience to convene on this discussion?
Yes, sir, I'll do that.
Thank you very much. Now we're up to public comment. Does it?
Miss Kathy Dwyer has her hand raised.
Okay. Ms. Dwyer, you recognized by the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll make this quick. First, I want to say what a pleasure it is to have you as our chair of the DD Council and what a wonderful job you're doing. The only request I have from the public is if there's a way for the DD Council or through the LaCan email system that we receive notification of DD Council committee and council meetings.
Thank you for that. And yes. Thank you for that. And yes, we will.
All committee and council meetings are put out on social media and on our website. I'm uncertain how else she's asking to be notified.
Ms. Dwyer, your hand is raised again.
Ms. Dwyer, you're recognized by the chair.
Yes, thank you. I'm aware it's on the website and occasionally I see it on Facebook. I'm just asking for an email notification using the LaCan subscription list. Unless the DD Council cannot use LaCan's email distribution list for notices, then perhaps start a separate email distribution list. While I know it's on the website, and when I think of it as now that I'm a senior, I certainly go to it and subscribe to the meetings, but I am not always able to remember to go check the website. So this is just an accommodation for an elderly person. Thank you.
You're welcome. We'll look into that to make sure. It's our goal as the executive committee and the council try to make the name of the DD Council as broad as possible and to expand the footprint in the state of Louisiana. So we thank you for that input. Do we have any more public comments before we come to an adjourn?
There's no other comment.
Okay. Before we close, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. Listen, I know time has been well spent, but I know it's very progressive. I don't want anybody to walk away feeling defeated just because what you were requesting may not have been initially met on this time, but make sure you realize that the seed has been planted and that we're going to move forward with everything that we can do to try to help the DD, help all of its exponents, and not only that, the families helping families. I just want to say this, the job that we do, like Dr. McKee said, everyone here is basically volunteer. There's a face to what you do. All of us, the best way I can describe it, we're nails. You know, when a person walks in the house, they always talk about how pretty a picture is, but nobody ever talks about the nail that's holding that picture up on the wall. Everyone on this council, everyone that gave public comment, you're a nail. You're holding up a pretty picture. Make no mistake about it. We recognize that and we thank you for it. So on that note, I want everyone to have themselves a great night. We'll see you in the morning, all fresh, bushy-eyed, and ready to take care of some business so we can make sure that we look out for the constituents that we've been blessed to be stewards of. Y'all have a great night. Bye-bye.
Will you send me the Word, not the Excel sheet, but when